Okay, we're going to do a few experiments today to determine whether matter has gone through a physical change or a chemical change. So first I'm going to start off with a piece of brown paper, and what you do is you take lemon juice, and I'm just going to put a letter on it, and you will put this paper on a hot pad or some sort of heat source to see what happens to the paper. And if you look closely, it's starting to steam a little bit. The paper changes colors, and once the lemon juice dries, you'll see the bee. Therefore, you can tell that this is undergoing a chemical change due to the color change. And anytime you add heat, it usually speeds up the process of a chemical change. Alright, we're going to try another one. I am going to take baking soda and add water to it to see if anything happens. I'm sorry, baking powder. If you see, when I add baking powder and mix it, nothing is happening to the baking powder except that it's being dissolved in the liquid. This means that it is a physical change, because if we evaporate all of the water, then we can get the baking soda back. So, physical change. Now I'm going to try another one. This is chalk, and with the chalk I'm going to add a few drops of vinegar to see what happens. Well, when you do experiments, they don't always turn out the way they're supposed to. The chalk is supposed to bubble. Anytime there are bubbles in an experiment, it means that there is a chemical reaction going on because a gas is being released. So this should be a chemical reaction. When you do it in your classroom, you may want to test a different kind of chalk or a few different kinds to make sure that it works before you do the experiment. Another experiment you can do is take baking soda and add vinegar to that to see what kind of reaction that you get. If you see here, the vinegar and baking soda create bubbles that release a gas, and therefore we know that it has undergone a chemical change. Alright, let's go back to our heat source, and I'm going to put candle wax in the heat to see what happens. And if you look closely, the candle wax is beginning to melt very quickly. Now if you think about it, it is still wax. So it is not going through a chemical change, it is staying wax. It does not change its chemical, so therefore it's a physical change. And if we let it sit to the side, it'll begin to harden and go back to the solid that it was before. We'll try another one with water. When we put water on a heat source, it'll begin to heat up really quickly because it's not much. You can start seeing some of the steam coming off. Water is the only liquid that can go through a physical change as it's changing its state of matter. It can go from a solid to liquid and a gas, but obviously our candle wax can't go to a gas and we can't get it back. But you can tell it's beginning to harden. So the water is starting to boil, and you can see the water vapor coming off of it. So we have a physical change with water as it evaporates. And then I'll set one more on here. This is sugar. So if we set sugar on our heat source, we'll see what happens. And right away you can see it's pretty hot. It's starting to melt a little bit. As the sugar melts, it's going through a physical change, but when it begins to heat up more, it's turning brown. And with the color change, it's definitely chemical. And you can smell that it's giving off an odor as it cooks and begins to burn a little bit. So here we have a chemical change. I'll turn that off. All right, we have just a couple more. Here we have water. If we add salt to water and stir it in there, the salt that dissolves with the water, pretty much all of it dissolved in there. This is a physical change because it's dissolving, and you can get back the salt after you evaporate the water, just like with the baking powder. So this would be a physical change. Then we have one more. We have milk, and we're going to add some vinegar to it to see what happens. I'll just stir it up a little to see. Now the milk is starting to thicken with the vinegar. It means that it's curdling a little bit. You can see it sticking to the side of the glass. This is a chemical change, and we're not going to be able to get back just our plain milk or take the vinegar out. So we have a completely new substance. I'm going to try to drink it. But if you do this with your students will get a lab form to fill out. And as they're going through the labs, they will do each experiment with a partner. They'll take observations of what has happened. So for example, the sugar, it started to change color, it turned brown. They can say that it was a chemical change, and the evidence is a change of color. And they'll come to conclusions at the end of their experiment, and most of them will be able to determine the difference between a physical and chemical change. The main thing is that in a chemical change, a new substance is formed, and a lot of the evidence comes from a gas forming where they'll see bubbles, a color change, or sometimes the state of matter changes, but you can't get back what you had before. If it's a physical change, like with the water and the wax, they can have a change of state and matter, but the matter that they're working with didn't change its substance. And then also dissolving is a part of a physical change. And that's about it. So I recommend doing this experiment with your children. They'll really enjoy it. And when they're finished, they would fill out what their conclusions were. They would determine whether their hypothesis was right or wrong, and hopefully they'll have a better understanding of what physical and chemical changes are and the evidence behind each one.